If you want to ensure that your emails land in your subscribers or your potential customers' inboxes, then you would need to do certain things even before you launch a campaign. I did talk about the foundational risks that are associated with your email in a previous video. I will link it on the top here for you to take a look at. I'll also drop that link in the description. But apart from those foundational risks, we are talking specifically about Mailchimp and a few things that are associated with Mailchimp that are not usually a part of what you do with other email service providers. That's because Mailchimp is an old legacy provider. One or two steps extra that you would need to take to ensure that your SPF, DKIM, and Dmarc are set up right. Now, SPF, DKIM, and Dmarc for the uninitiated are protocols in place to ensure that you are the authorized sender sending out those emails, marketing, transactional, or otherwise. The reason why you would need to do this is because bad players generally use your domain name to send out spam emails, phishing emails, and all sorts of other emails that are actually bad for your brand reputation and domain reputation. So you would want to avoid that, and this is only done by using these three protocols. Sometimes you use only two, sometimes you use all the three. It really depends on the email service provider you're using, but regardless, these are the three protocols that you should absolutely work on. And for Mailchimp specifically, there are three stages that you would need that you take to go through your setup the right way with respect to Dmarc. If you're using another email service provider such as Klaviyo, Omnisend, and any others, usually the stages would be two: setting up your Dmarc and monitoring your Dmarc. But in case of Mailchimp, you would have to set up Dmarc first for your main domain. Then you would have to repeat the process for each of your subdomains that you want to use. Now, the reason why you would want to use a subdomain is to alienate the risk that your main domain will have when you start sending out email campaigns or transactional emails. You would not want to use your main domain for all of these emails because you will be marked as spam. Maybe if that happens, then you don't want your domain name to take that hit. You would rather want to use a separate subdomain such as send.yourdomain.com or something of that sort that really you have to think about. But that subdomain is the one that will take that risk, works more like an insurance policy. Let's talk about the three stages of Dmarc setup by using Mailchimp. On the screen here, you're looking at Mailchimp typical dashboard. On the top right corner, you will have access to your account details. Click on account and billing. And on this page, you will have access to what is called as domains somewhere on the top navigation menu. Click on domains. Here you find your domains. If you've already added a few domains, they'll show up here. If you have to add subdomains and get started from that point on, then you'll start here as well. Let's assume that you haven't started or your authentication process for your domain, which is the stage one. Now, to authenticate domain itself, you'll find your custom domain showing up right here. As in my case, fetchprofits.com, there are two types of authentication. One is automated, the second is manual. More often than not, you will be able to go through authentication process automatically and make this work in just a couple of seconds. But if for some reason it doesn't work, then you would have to set it up manually. This is the button that you would need to click and go through a wizard that's available for you, which connects with your DNS provider. Now, talking about DNS provider is domain name service, which is available given to you by your domain name provider. So wherever you purchase your domain name from is where you will find your DNS, and that's where you need to log in. Let's click on start authentication. You will get a wizard which will allow you to go through this a few steps. If you click on continue, it will analyze your domain and find out which domain service provider you're presently using, and that makes it really easy for you. In my case, Cloudflare has already been identified, and all I need to do now is authorize this with Cloudflare. When I authorize with Cloudflare, which could involve me logging into Cloudflare, it will authorize with Cloudflare and it will add the DNS records automatically so that your Dmarc and all other associated records that are required by Mailchimp are set up automatically. If for some reason this doesn't work, or if you wanted to see what was added to your Dmarc, click on Show Added DNS Records right here. When you do, you will find that three record types were added to your DNS records: two CNAME records and one TXT record. The CNAME records are for DKIM, DKIM, and TXT is Dmarc. For whatever reason, if this doesn't happen automatically, and if you need to set it up, then you would need to go into your DNS records and add those values one after the other. Here in the type, you would choose CNAME, pick CNAME, and you would add those values here, the name and the target, which have been provided to you by Mailchimp right here, as you can see. CNAME number one, you will add that. CNAME number two, you will add that. Then the next one is going to be text type, which you're going to choose by coming here and typing in txt. You'll find the text record type. Click on that and add the name of the text record type that is provided to you. In most cases, it's going to be something like underscore Dmarc. That's stage one of Mailchimp. You get to the next stage, which is very specific to Mailchimp. When it comes to subdomains with respect to Mailchimp, Mailchimp will treat each subdomain as an additional custom email domain. So let's say I wanted to add a subdomain which goes by something like mail.yourdomain.com, which is what we spoke about earlier part of the video, where you would need something like this so as to eliminate the risk that your main domain will take on when you start sending out email marketing campaigns and automation flows and so on. So because you don't want your main domain to face that risk, you're adding a subdomain, and adding a subdomain with Mailchimp will require you to actually add that subdomain inside Mailchimp here, but that requires a specific process. Even before you think of adding a subdomain to Mailchimp, you would need access to an email inbox which is associated with that particular subdomain. And hence, for that reason, you would need to set up an inbox first. This depends on the email service you normally use to send out professional emails with respect to your brand or business. In my case, I use Gmail using Google Workspace, but you could be using something like Microsoft. You could be using something like Zoho Mail as shown, or you could be using something like Namecheap's email services. Regardless, whatever you email service you could be using, chances are that your MX records, which are the specific records that are used for email, already set up and running for your main domain, which is yourdomain.com. In that case, you will leave them untouched because you're adding a new subdomain. Let's take the example of Zoho Mail. In this case, if you are inside the Zoho Mail dashboard, this is what you will find. If any domain names were added, they will show up right here under domain name, status, and registrar info, and so on. This is a fresh case that we are adding. So click on add a domain name. In this case, you would want to add what is called as a subdomain. Now, before you even do this, you would have to think of your subdomain in the first place. Are you going to use something like send.yourdomain.com, promos.yourdomain.com, and so on? This will be the new domain that you are adding. When you add this, you get specific MX records that are associated with this subdomain that you just added. Remember, subdomains and domains are treated individually. So once you click on add, you would get all of the details you need for MX records. Those set of 5 MX records that you will get is what you will add to your DNS. You'll go in here, click on MX, choose MX, and add those MX records here as shown. And you will add this 5 times because there is going to be a set of 4 to 5 records that you will get for each domain that you associate it with your professional inbox. Once you do that, you will have the ability to receive and send emails for this particular domain that you set up right here. You would need this because the first step inside Mailchimp is when you click on add and verify a new domain, it will ask you for an email address. And this is the email address that you just created by using those 5 MX records. You can send a test email to yourself to that inbox that you just created now right here. Once you know you're receiving emails, all you need to do is enter that specific email that you just created and then click send verified email. Mailchimp will want to know that you have access to this email. And once you check that email for that email verification from Mailchimp, you click on that and verify that email. Once that is done, your custom email domain will be added here, which is in this case, because it's a subdomain, going to be something like your chosen subdomain name dot yourdomain.com. For example, it could be something like send.yourdomain.com or promos.yourdomain.com, and so on. You would choose that specific subdomain for sending domain. Mailchimp will use that specific subdomain to send out all of your marketing campaigns and all of your automation flows. That's stage number 2. Stage number 3 is where you will monitor your Dmarc. What would have happened typically when you started with this authentication process, regardless of which custom email domain you were using, whether it's your own domain or whether it's a subdomain, your Dmarc would have been set to what is called as policy is equal to none, alphabet P is equal to none. That is the first stage of Dmarc monitoring. Now, Dmarc monitoring is an essential step that you would need to take, which spans from 4 weeks to 6 weeks. You would want to monitor your emails because you will now know what are the authorized sending sources that are being tracked. Want to use a tool like, let's say, Dmarc Wise. There are several other tools that you could use, such as Valley Mail and many others. I will point to some in the description below. This is how the interface looks like. You have an overview with your domain and you will see all of the details you will need while you're monitoring your Dmarc setup. You look at the overview and look at the sources here. You will have authorized sources here. Instead of Klaviyo, you would be seeing Mailchimp here on the top. You might have transactional email enabled with Zepto. In that case, Zepto also will show as an authorized source. Having said that, you'll also see non-compliant sources here. But what you would be typically looking for on non-compliant sources is all of the bad players that are spoofing or send using your domain to send out all kinds of spam, phishing emails, and so on, which is a huge brand risk for you and for your domain. So you would want to keep a note of what's happening with your non-compliant sources. This is what happens when you start with DMARC policy set to P is equal to none. When you are on that policy level, you will probably be seeing a lot of non-compliant sources. As you keep seeing these non-compliant sources, and if you know that there are lots of them, then you would want to move from P is equal to none to P is equal to quarantine, which is the instruction that you're giving to all of the email clients in the world like Gmail, Outlook, and Yahoo. That is the quarantine stage. But the last stage of DMARC is P is equal to reject. And if you get to that stage, all of these bad players' emails that they're sending out will land in the spam folder. Meanwhile, all of the authorized sources that you have set thanks to these protocols are going to land in the specific email folder that they're supposed to land in for your subscribers. Or this is the last stage of setup for Mailchimp. In summary, again, specifically speaking for Mailchimp, you would have to authorize your main domain, which is yourdomain.com. You would then have to set up an inbox using your professional inbox that you picked up or you purchased, and you will create a subdomain there first, set up MX records using your DNS zone, then come back in here, send in a verification email, verify that email, custom email domain will be added here, which is essentially what Mailchimp calls as a subdomain. And that is a subdomain you will also use for all of the email marketing messages and automation flows that you'll set on Mailchimp. Having said that, this particular subdomain that you just added will also require its own SPF, DKIM, and DMARC policies, followed through with using a tool like dmarcwise.io or Valley Mail, doing this so as to monitor all of the emails that are sent using your authorized sources and also capture emails that are going from non-authorized sources or non-compliant sources. And these non-compliant sources are what you need to keep an eye on while keeping an eye on authorized sources as well and monitor it that way. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, please do send out emails to hello@fetchprofits.com or comment below. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe to the channel. This is Ash from Fetch Profits signing out.